So teaching deaf students or deaf and hearing impaired students has, similar to blindness, its own set of guidelines and difficulties that need to be addressed and adaptations that need to be made with the curricula and the lessons. Um, Deaf students can see images or videos and stuff, and they can acquire knowledge through those avenues, but they are going to need a lot more of textual knowledge, textual commands, textual instructions for their assignments. Handing them an assignment and simply speaking the directions to them would not be very beneficial to the student. You would need to go ahead and make sure you clearly label instructions and directions on the top of assignments. That way they always are knowing what they're to be doing. On your presentations, as a teacher, you would need to help your students by you can include images, but you would need to include captions, and you would need to be very textual. You would need to include a lot of written things. You wouldn't rely as much on videos or images that require audio to acquire any sort of knowledge from them. You would need to kind of lessen those as much as possible. That way that your deaf students wouldn't necessarily feel that they're missing out on information. Instead, use audio or visual cues that, or sorry, not audio cues, but visual cues that do not really require audio. So that way the student doesn't feel like they're missing out on anything. Alright, so for teaching blind students have their own set of needs, and blind and visually impaired. Um, Things such as being a little bit more audible or verbal in your commands or your directions, or even just conveying knowledge, is something that blind and visually impaired students are in much more need of, because they can hear you, they just can't relate to any images or written text very well. So a common way to help students in the classroom, in like their classroom environment, or even their assignments, is Braille. Give them uh, assignments that have Braille on it, or have signs that have Braille on it. That way they can, if they know Braille, they can feel the bumps that the language of Braille has, so that they can understand what a sign says or what their assignment says, or give them recordings that have the directions on their assignment. Another way to go would be IEP and 504 plans that you and a counselor would work out with these students. You would talk about how you could best help their needs, assess how much assistance they need, what varying degree of visually impairedness do they have, how dependent on the verbal commands are they, can they read a little bit or can they not at all. I found a really great website at the bottom of this page that has some tips on how to help visually impaired students, how to assess them, how to guide them, and things of that nature. So the likelihood of having a student who is both blind and deaf is very low in a secondary school setting. The amount of extra assistance that a student with both impairments would need would be a lot higher than what an average secondary teacher would be able to provide, simply because the pace at which they would need to go would be so much lower than a normal class setting. Not because of lowered IQ or anything, but just because they need extra time with the material to grasp it, because it's harder. Two of the main ways people learn have been kind of eliminated for them, so they need to go at a much slower pace. However, you could have a situation where one person is visually impaired or blind, and another separate student is deaf or has hearing disabilities. Uh, in that case, you would need to do adaptations to your lesson plan that accommodate for both. And while the students of one might feel that you're ignoring them on one, you would have to simply reassure them that, hey, I'm not trying to exclude you from this. It's just we have another student who learns better this way, and I need to accommodate his needs as well. You're getting the same amount of information. You want to make sure that whenever you offer something to a deaf kid, that you can still convey that to a blind kid as well. So including Braille, including textual knowledge on your PowerPoints or presentations, whatever you may use, and then including images that you don't necessarily need audio for your deaf kids. So doing a mix of both is the best way to go about helping students who are afflicted with both impairments. Oh, separate students who are afflicted with both impairments.